KOCT, its board of directors, staff, and the City of Oceanside do not support nor promote any candidates. We provide the following program as a public service for voters. All candidates have been invited to participate in this program, but not all were able to or chose to do so.
Good afternoon and welcome to this special edition of KOCT Election 2024 coverage here on the North County Roundtable. My name is Kent Davy. I am a retired newspaper editor and independent journalist. I'm also the chairman of the KOCT Board of Directors. Today we're featuring the conversations with the candidates for the 49th Congressional District election. Republican challenger Matt Gunderson faces three-term incumbent Representative Mike Levin. This is a race for the two-year term of the U.S. House of Representatives district, which covers southern coastal Orange County and coastal North County, including the cities of Oceanside, Carlsbad, all the way south to Solana Beach. For today's forum, each candidate will be given 2 or 3 minutes for an opening statement and the same for a closing statement. Who goes first has been determined by coin flip. I'll try and alternate questions for each of the candidates and give everybody each an opportunity to respond. We intend this to be conversational, so no one's on the clock, but I will gently cut off answers that threaten to turn into a filibuster. This broadcast is being streamed live on KOCT.org, available on video on demand, and will be rebroadcast on our Cox Cable and AT&T UVerse channels. So let's go down with opening statements. Mike, would you like to start?
Thank you, Kent, and thank you, Matt. It's great to be with you, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. I've been so honored to represent this community for the last 5.5 years, and I've been focused on delivering results, not on empty rhetoric, not on petty partisanship. I'm so grateful to have 30 bipartisan bills signed into law, both by the former president and by the current president. And that's why the Center for Effective Lawmaking, which is nonpartisan, has consistently rated me one of the top 5% of all lawmakers in the Congress. In fact, the Veterans for Foreign Wars, because of the work that we've done on veterans these last 5 years, just named me the Legislator of the Year for 2024, something that's a great honor to me. I've been focused on everything from trying to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for seniors to protecting Social Security and Medicare. I'm the only candidate in this race that's been endorsed by Planned Parenthood because they know that I always have and always will stand up for women's reproductive rights, for IVF, and for the right to contraception. I'm also the only person in this race that's been endorsed by all of the local law enforcement organizations, including the Oceanside Police Officers Association and Oceanside Fire. I think they know that I've worked with them, will continue to work with them. Again, not interested in partisanship, interested in delivering results. And if you look up and down the district, we've been able to deliver $931 million in federal funding for projects all around this district. You can go on our website at mikelevin.org and you can see a full list, everything from getting sand on our beaches to our roads, our water systems, a new homeless navigation center here in the city of Oceanside, new fire station 1 downtown Oceanside, and we're really just getting started. And look, at the end of the day, I think representative is not only my job title, it is my job description. I take great pride in being as accessible and accountable as any representative in the United States. And that's why I'm part of the End Corruption Caucus as well. I think that members of Congress should not be able to trade individual shares of stock. I've helped lead a bipartisan effort in that regard. And I also do not take any corporate campaign contributions. I think you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric today. I think perhaps Matt and I will agree. I hope we agree on quite a few important things to our community. But at the end of the day, you deserve results, not rhetoric. That's what I've delivered. That's what I'll continue to deliver. I'd be honored and grateful to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Matt.
Absolutely, Kent. Thank you for having this conversation, and thank you, Mike, for joining us in this conversation. You know, I am Matt Gunderson, and I'm a businessman. I'm not a politician, and I didn't come up through the ranks of local government. And I think we're having this conversation, and I'm running for Congress because Mike Levin and I have distinctly different views of what the future of California and our country should look like. Now, a little bit about myself. I raised my 4 daughters here in Southern California along with my wife, Margot, and it's because of those 4 girls and every other young American that I'm running, because I'm distinctly concerned about the future of this country and of this state. I came to California 25 years ago, not to buy a business, but to build a business. And I built 3 of them, and I created hundreds of jobs. And while I was doing that, I did live and experience the onerous high costs, high taxes, and overzealous regulations that the Democratic Party, the one-party rule in Sacramento, puts on the shoulders of our small businesses. And it simply paralyzes and is an albatross around the corner of building a prosperous and productive community. And I'm not your typical politician. I'm a pro-choice Republican that believes abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And I tell people, you're probably not going to agree with me 100% of the time, but you'll never have to wonder where I stand on an issue or how I got there. And I think it's that kind of transparency and candor that we want in our public officials. And candidly, that's not the kind of transparency and candor we get from our incumbent representative. He'll come back into the district and he'll talk to you about being a bipartisan consensus builder. But the reality is that he's voted 98.7% of the time with the Progressive Caucus, 100% of the time with the Biden-Harris administration. At the end of the day, he's voted for the excessive spending bills that have lit the fires of skyrocketing inflation and have destroyed our family budgets. He sat quiet while Harris and Biden opened up our borders to the south, and we've experienced an immigration crisis, a public safety crisis, a public health crisis, and an economic crisis as our communities attempt to absorb those immigrants into our communities. If you want to label me, I'd say label me a futurist, because we've got to look down the road and find new solutions to old problems. And at the end of the day, I think we have to set our rhetoric aside. We have to set our rhetoric aside and just ask for government to give us a few more answers and a few more solutions, and we're not getting them right now. The past has not worked, the future can, and I want to be part of that solution.
Thank you, Matt. Start with the first question with you. According to the nonpartisan Pew Research Center, 81% of voters across the nation rate the economy as their top concern. Some people say that that view is misplaced, that the economy is fine. They point to the stock market. Others say we're teetering on the cusp of a recession. What do you think?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, as every family would, am I better off financially today than I was 4 years ago? And the answer is no. You cannot look at skyrocketing inflation where every single grocery item you buy is more expensive. Every one of the issues, the things that you have to buy on a daily basis, whether it's car insurance, health insurance, homeowners insurance, you name it, we are under an albatross of excessive inflation, and it has to stop. And we have to start by making our country energy independent. We cannot step back and have these grandiose visions that we're going to solve America's problems by becoming dependent on renewables. I mean, skyrocketing energy costs, skyrocketing gas costs have drive up the cost of everything, and just ask every morning when people have to step up and go to the gas station or go to the grocery store if they think the economy's good.
Mike?
I would say a few things
Stock
about
market.
A few things about this. It's very important to understand where we've been and where we are today. 4 years ago, after Donald Trump had mismanaged the global pandemic, which led to at one point 14.7% unemployment in the United States, President Biden, Vice President Harris, they took office. They had 10 million people who were unemployed. And we did everything we could to get people back to work and to get small businesses back and keeping their people on payroll. Matt Gunderson's small business, car dealerships, actually was a recipient of $2 million in the Paycheck Protection Program, after which he laid off 95 employees, sold the car businesses, and pocketed the money. And so there are a lot of other businesses, though, that we helped that didn't do that did the right thing, that kept people employed. Now, here's where we are today. Inflation was at 9.1% at the peak, obviously far too high. It's down at 2.5%. Unemployment is at around 4%. The stock market has been doing quite well. But look, the cost of goods, the cost of housing, the cost of groceries, the cost of fuel, all are still too high. The difference is that I'm actually trying to work on solutions. Again, not just rhetoric, with all due respect, but actually working across the aisle whenever I can, however I can, to try to meet people where they are. Now let's talk about fuel, since you brought up fuel. My opponent, Matt, you have a vested interest, you have a political and financial stake in seeing the fossil fuel economy stay the way it is today. You own Exxon stock yourself. And you also, when you ran unsuccessfully for state senate this past time, you were the single largest recipient of fossil fuel contributions of the literally hundreds of people running for state assembly, state senate. You received over $2 million. I stand up to the fossil fuel industry. I have for 5.5 years. And I do believe that we're not going to be able to end our dependence on fossil fuels overnight. But I do believe that over time, we need to accelerate the deployment of renewables. I won't make any apologies for that. I want to see electrification and decarbonization. We can do it if we're smart, and we can lead the world just as we have in every other industrial revolution. Now, the last thing I'll say about inflation, there are two very different views out there right now. What President Trump is proposing are massive tariffs, huge tariffs, and we know from every significant independent economist out there, from Moody's Analytics to Goldman Sachs, you name it, overwhelmingly they believe that Trump's policies that you espouse, in the primary you ran as a Trump Republican, side by side, two conservatives, two independent businessmen. You know the male I'm talking about. You can pivot now and say you're not a Trump Republican, but we know that you are. What Trump would do with tariffs, with massive restrictive mass deportations, with tax cuts for billionaires, we know that it would create massive inflation. Some have said it will lead to recession, and another $5 to $10 trillion will be added to the national debt. I'm a Democrat who believes very strongly that we need to tackle the deficits in the national debt, and we will be at $50 trillion by the end of this decade if we do nothing. It will be worse with the tariffs that your party espouses. And the spending is under control. The revenues, we have to get this under control. It can't just be tax cuts for rich people. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work now. And I haven't seen anything from you that suggests you're actually going to stand up to Donald Trump or Mike Johnson when it comes to any of this.
Okay. Both of you, I believe, have made statements about helping the middle class. What specifically does helping the middle class mean? Is there a specific thing that
Sure.
means as opposed to just language?
Housing is a huge example. So there are, on average, people spend 36% of their income on housing. Mm-hmm. There are 22% of the people in this district that spend over 50% of their income on housing. I want to see a dramatically expanded low-income housing tax credit. I want to see a first-time homebuyer tax credit and something called the Helper Act that I've worked on to try to get a VA home loan style program for our first responders, our teachers, our nurses, our firefighters, those that we want to see in our community. I want to see a renter's tax credit. So that's on the housing piece. On the insurance piece, I'm working on a bill called the Insure Act that would provide a federal reinsurance program for wildfire-prone areas such as ours, all around our district. I've seen my wife and I, by the way, my wonderful wife, Chrissy, I have to give a shout out to Chrissy and our two kids at home. We have seen our own homeowners insurance go up almost 3 times since we moved in and bought our home a decade ago. Some people aren't able to get any insurance at all. They're stuck on Fair Act policies. It'll probably be exacerbated because of the airport fire that just occurred. So we're doing everything we can to provide that federal reinsurance program to lower premiums, to ensure that the companies, the state farms of the world can't just leave California. Fuel is another issue. We can keep talking, or we can go to the next thing.
Well,
let's a minute.
Let Matt answer.
You said we could respond, and I want to go back and respond to his first conversation. He steps out here and says we want to set partisan and rhetoric aside, and the first thing he does is gets into personal attacks.
It's important to tell the truth.
The reality is, Mike, when you sit there and say that you want to set aside partisanship, you want to set aside rhetoric, and have a conversation, and you immediately revert to personal attacks.
You
misled
personal
people
attack.
about PPP program. Nobody gets to pocket that money, and nobody laid off 95 people. If we want to get into the diatribes about California labor law, we can do that, but you know that
We're
it's
not
too
running for state
complicated of an
office
issue
right
right here. No, I'm responding to your attacks on me that are personal attacks, and you're misleading and being dishonest with the public.
Did you dispute that you laid off 95 people after getting PPP loans? You said so yourself on a podcast. We have the recording.
Yeah. Okay. No, we laid off people after the governor shut our operation down, and we brought them all back.
You said, respectfully, you said the silver lining of the pandemic was that you could
let
lay
me
people
interrupt.
off.
Let me interrupt.
Otherwise you couldn't.
Let me interrupt both of you.
He wants to have this pleasant conversation and lead people to believe he's a nonpartisan consensus builder, and his first and only opportunity is to go into personal attacks.
And you said
I tell the truth and level with people.
Let me ask you, Matt.
So you should too.
Specifically, what would you do to help the middle class in specific terms?
Well, I think absolutely we have to address the issue of inflation. We have to address the issue of energy independence, drive down gas prices, and drive down energy costs. We have to, let's start with the gas taxes.
Okay.
Let's start with cutting our gas tax. I mean,
That's Sacramento. We're running
Mike
for
Levin
federal
opposed
office.
the state initiative.
We're running
to
for
reduce
federal
our
office.
gas tax. But you are a Democrat living in a Democratic state. And you have an opportunity to use your leverage
You're
and
a
use
Republican.
your influence on
I
your
wouldn't know it from your
administration's
ads. I wouldn't know it from your ads.
Please don't talk over each other, because nobody will be able to understand what either of you are saying. Okay. So let me go back. Things specifically to help the middle class. Cutting gas tax is something you were arguing for. Anything else?
Well, I think we have to renew the Trump tax cuts, because if we do not renew the Trump tax cuts, as much as they want to say they're just tax cuts for billionaires, it will be an albatross around the American people.
Okay.
Well, 83% of the Trump tax cuts went to the top 1% of taxpayers. That's just the fact. And if all those tax cuts were extended, you would add $5 to $10 trillion to the debt over the next decade, according to nonpartisan economic analysis. I want to curtail the debt and deficits, not add to it.
I want to ask that. We've got $35 trillion of federal debt right now. The national debt clock estimates there's another $123 million of unfunded liabilities. Are we going to cut spending? We're going to raise taxes. We're going to grow our way out. How do we get out of this?
Well, just saying you're going to cut taxes for rich people and that'll lead to magical economic growth hasn't worked. It won't work. You know, when Trump was running the first time in 2016, he said he would eliminate the national debt altogether in 8 years. Instead, during his 4 years in office, almost $8 trillion was added to the debt, roughly a quarter of what's there. And as I said before, according to the CBO, we will have $50 trillion if we don't dramatically change our ways. So what do? Well, I think we've got to continue the middle class tax cuts that were put in place under the past administration. But I do think that we need the wealthy, the billionaires, the big corporations to pay their fair share. And so now what Trump wants to do is cut the corporate tax rate even further to 15%. You know, it was at 35% under Obama. Then it went down to 21. Most Republicans would have been fine with 25 or 28, but they went to 21. And now Trump wants to cut it down to 15. When it comes to the SALT, the state and local tax deduction, that's another area. Right. Hopefully we would agree on that. I haven't heard your position on that, but hopefully that's an area we would agree on. But let's do all we can also to get spending under control. And that means taking a hard look at our defense and non-defense discretionary spending, doing everything we can. It doesn't mean cutting off true investments, though. See, some of my friends across the aisle, they actually, are looking at programs like, the child tax credit or Head Start or nutrition assistance for children. When you invest in children, you're yielding a 7 to 10 to 1 economic return on that money. When you invest in infrastructure, you actually are yielding about a 1.5 to 3 times return on investment. So let's look at the spending and figure out what's the best ROI and focus on that and make sure that we do that. And at the same time, if there are things that are wasteful, let's de-emphasize those programs.
Okay. Matt.
Well, you're going to hear...
Grow taxes, cut spending, grow our way out.
We probably have to do a little bit of all of the above, in the sense that we have to look at what our tax structure is and renew the Trump tax cuts. I agree with the congressman that SALT absolutely needs to be reinstated, and we have to revisit that. That's not a partisan issue, that's a geographic issue that you're going to have to fight.
Just so our viewers understand, could you very briefly explain what SALT is?
Well, SALT is the state and local tax deduction that applied to taxes you're paying on the local level and on the state level.
Okay.
And obviously, SALT is much more impactful in high tax states like California, New Jersey, and New York than it is in lower tax states. And that's why it becomes a geographic battle, not a partisan battle.
Sadly, this was Donald Trump looking at California, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and going after those states. We contribute a lot to the federal treasury. We just want back what's fair. But Kent, if I may say one more thing.
Let me make sure that Matt has finished the issue of the three alternatives.
Well, and with that, I would share with you, first of all, that the most encouraging thing about the presidential campaign, from my perspective as an outsider, is Elon Musk's National Office of Government Efficiency. We have to go in and we have to look at the efficient levels of government, audit every single department, and get rid of the the redundancy and the duplicity of our
I think we should make sure
agencies.
Elon Musk is paying his fair share of taxes. Elon Musk also on a
Isn't
podcast
about
laughed
Elon
about
Musk. It's about government efficiency.
He laughed
Please
about
don't talk over each other.
He laughed about firing people with former President Trump. They thought that was funny. But let me say one other very important thing that hasn't been addressed, and that's Social Security, because we have a very different perspective on this. So Matt is actually claiming to be an outsider. He's run for office just as many times as I have. He ran in Wisconsin in 1994 for U.S. Senate, and in 1996 in Wisconsin for U.S. House. He ran in 2022 after he'd moved here. So let's make sure that people know that you're not an outsider. You married into a very politically influential family, and your brother was a member of Congress for 16 years. So on Social Security, when he was running in Wisconsin in 1994 and 1996, he said that we need to raise the retirement age, cut benefits, and make sure seniors felt the pain. We have him on record saying that. I, on the other hand, want to make sure we protect and expand Social Security. How do we do it? Make sure that those at the very top of the economic ladder are paying their fair share into the payroll tax system. If we just had the payroll tax apply to income over $400,000 a year, as I have proposed in the Social Security 2100 Act, it would make the system solvent through roughly the end of the century, and you could actually have benefits indexed to inflation, getting seniors the help they need. You know, he may have a problem with seniors. We may have to talk about this some more.
1994 is many years ago, first of all, and I'm not going to apologize for there being something in my DNA that believes public service is valuable.
Well, don't
and
say
more
you're
of
an
us should
outsider.
serve and
Don't talk
too
over
few of
each
us
other,
do.
please.
You're no outsider.
You know, and the reality is, yes, have I stepped up and sought to serve the general public previously? Absolutely. But I came to California 25 years ago and worked inside the business world. I created jobs, I signed the front of paychecks, and I had real jobs and created real jobs, unlike somebody who's lived off of the government dole all your life.
Absolutely
and that,
wrong.
Absolutely.
I take great offense
if
to this.
If you're going to take a tax at me, I'm going to attack back.
I was involved. Well, you're speaking complete falsehood.
Well, you're speaking in falsehood.
I was, Kent, if I may,
Stop.
I was involved
Talking
as a
over each
private
other.
sector attorney working for a variety of clean energy companies for many years, doing all we could to grow businesses too. And I'm born and raised in Southern California. And I know that he and I might disagree on a lot of things. But you know, at the end of the day, I think we want a better California. We're doing everything we can. As a federal representative, though, I can't solve all the problems in Sacramento. Sacramento drives me nuts sometimes too, genuinely.
Okay, let me turn just slightly. Both Harris and Trump have proposed that there shouldn't be taxes on tips. Both of them, I believe, have proposed that the child tax credit should be moved up. What other, do you agree with either of those ideas? What other specific tax policies would you change?
I think every one of those should be considered, but that's what politicians do. They make big, broad promises to try to get votes without any realization about what's the reality of them actually playing into the legislative process. And we've got to go to Washington with a much more focused perspective on solving some of these problems. The concept of no taxes on tips, I'm all for it. Okay, I have already paid taxes on the money that I'm already laying down on that table for a tip for a service worker. I'm all for it. But let's figure out how it works into the big picture economically and from a tax structure. So, you're going to hear a lot of numbers spewed out of the congressman's mouth because that's what politicians do, and they want to bamboozle the average voter with promises and numbers. And the reality is, we know that our government is failing us right now. And as I said earlier, the past hasn't worked, the future can. So let's get down the road.
Okay.
Providing data is not bamboozling anybody. Providing facts, that's not bamboozling anybody.
Tips.
What I would say, there's a massive difference between what Trump wants to do and what Harris wants to do when it comes to this concept, no tax on tips. They use the same rhetoric, but Trump would apply it pretty much across the board. So Wall Street hedge fund managers with huge commissions and other innovative payment structures would actually be able to potentially write off a lot of their income because they will qualify it under that loophole. All Harris is saying is if you're actually in the service economy and you're making under a certain amount of money, then you'd be able to write off that amount. Massive difference. And as far as a child tax credit, this is very personal. Having two young kids, my kids are 12 and 10 years old. They attend our local public school, a Title I school, where for a lot of these kids, the best meal of the day is that free and reduced lunch meal. And when we passed the child tax credit as part of the American Rescue Plan a few years ago, it cut the rate of child poverty in our district and food insecurity massively, roughly in half. There were around 10,000 kids who were lifted out of poverty in our district alone. But what happened is when that bill expired, his party very sadly refused to work with us despite the overwhelming economic data that it's actually a great return on investment to invest in kids. And that the child tax credit expired because the Republicans would not work with us in good faith to continue it. I hope and pray that we can get those kids the assistance that they need, because what has happened subsequent to that is the childhood poverty rates have ticked back up. If we had an extended child tax credit and we provided a $6,000 tax credit for the first year of a child's life, it would do a dramatic amount of good in this country. And I desperately want to do that. I think that's so critically important to anybody with young kids. And we got to work together on it. I hope we can.
Okay, let me ask a question this way. What are you willing to put on the table to cut in terms of spending?
Well, I think I would start with fossil fuel subsidies, for one. So again, my opponent probably will disagree with this. He was the largest recipient of oil and gas money in his 2022 campaign for the state legislature. He is a stockholder of Exxon. But we subsidize in the tune of tens of billions of dollars to the fossil fuel industry. I would also look very carefully at our defense budget. Now, I've agreed that we've got to invest in having the most lethal fighting force in the world, and I take tremendous pride in the readiness and the preparation of our Marines and sailors at Camp Pendleton. But I think we all know that there are parts of our defense budget that need to be looked at as well. I would stop corporate welfare, for one. When he started his car dealerships, he got $600,000 from the city of Mission Viejo given to him to open those dealerships. Then, several years later, with the Paycheck Protection Program, which, look, the PPP was a mixed bag. It was Marco Rubio's bill. You may know that. We helped 20,000 small businesses. His business benefited, and then he let a bunch of people go, and he sold the dealerships. And they're now under new management. I saw the sign, under new management.
Matt, what would you cut?
Well, I think it's ironic that the world is falling apart around us, and his first item is he wants to cut our defense spending. I already referenced to you that
I
the
just
most
said we needed the
appealing
most
thing to me
lethal
is the
fighting
fact
force
that
in the world.
Elon Musk, in this presidential race, has talked about a National Office of Government Efficiency. The redundancy that exists in government has to be addressed, identified, and stop the big bloated, big government bureaucracy we have and start saving money places.
Do you agree with all the stuff Elon Musk has been posting on X?
I also would tell you
the anti-Semitic
that,
bile that he posts.
He talks about fossil fuel subsidies. Let's talk about electric car subsidies.
Let's stop talking over the top of each other and let me ask the questions, please.
He seems to really like Elon Musk. I just want to see if he espouses his philosophy.
I understand. Maybe later. Okay. Mike brought up a notion that a lot of people have talked about, that congressmen, and I don't know exactly what his proposal says, but congressmen, their spouses, at least senior staffs, ought not to be able to trade equities and stocks. Do you agree with that idea?
I agree with that. I mean, he wants to throw it in my face that I own Exxon stock. I don't even know what stock I own. It's in a portfolio at
first true
UBS,
thing you've said.
period. The only reason, and I don't even prepare my financial disclosure form that is submitted to the FEC, UBS prepares it.
So you would be okay with congressmen not being able to trade stocks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's good. We need more people in the coalition.
Does it bother you a little bit that the former House Speaker is kind of the leading example of that?
It does. I get frustrated when Democrats or Republicans are doing it. I'll give you one example, Kent. At the very beginning of the pandemic, February 2020, we were all being briefed for the first time on how serious COVID really was. Robert Redfield, if you remember him, and others. And they had us in a room and they told us how serious this was going to be. And some of my colleagues, both sides of the aisle, used that as an opportunity to go buy and sell, stocks that are directly relevant to that material non-public information that we were being provided. That should be illegal. And the problem is the reporting standards aren't very good. There's something called the Stock Act, has no teeth. We should just ban it altogether. When my wife and I decided I was going to do this in 2017, we started running. I said, we have to sell every individual stock. I want to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And unfortunately, there are plenty of people on my side of the aisle that, are doing things the wrong way as well, and they need to be called to the carpet. That's why it's so hard to fix. Same with corporate PAC money. If you want to, try to do what you can to stop corporate PAC influence, there's about 16% of the Congress doesn't take corporate PAC money. We've tried very hard to fix this, but people on my side of the aisle are just as resistant. We even had a bill called Uncheck the Box. So when you get all these recurring campaign contributions, and it's pre-checked, so you get a recurring contribution. I tried to ban that, actually working with Mike Lawler in New York to ban that, and he and I are both finding the same thing, which is there are far too many people in both parties unwilling to address it.
Okay.
So it's disingenuous for him to say that he doesn't accept corporate campaign contributions because he gets a ridiculous amount of money from his colleagues' leadership PACs, which is filled with the coffers of corporate campaign contributions.
There's a massive difference.
So it's money laundering, but it still exists.
There's a massive difference between the direct contributions that he got, $2 million from the oil and gas companies, and tens of thousands of dollars from the tobacco companies that Matt took, as opposed to a leadership PAC where there's no direct interaction whatsoever between any of those companies directly contributing and the member that's the recipient.
Okay, I want to move on or back on to a topic that was very briefly mentioned. What role should fossil fuels and oil play in our future?
I think we have to acknowledge that today they play a very important role, but that role needs to decrease over time.
Should America be a net exporter of oil?
I think America, under President Biden, has drilled more oil than they did under President Trump. In California, despite the fact we're a leader in clean energy, we're also a leader in fossil energy as well. I'm mindful of those jobs. We have to be very expeditious in how that transition occurs. But here's the deal. We have a climate crisis. We have some of the best climate scientists in the world in our district. Scripps Institution of Oceanography, UC San Diego, UC Irvine. I have taken the time over these last 6 years, and actually long before that, to actually listen to them. I don't pretend to be the expert, but I will listen to the experts, and they will tell you that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions commensurate with what their analysis suggests, or you're going to continue to have further and further exacerbated extreme weather events. And we're seeing everything from wildfires to droughts to, you name it. And again, we're either going to double down on the dirty energy policies of the past, we're going to do what Trump wants. Trump said to the oil and gas industry, give me $1 billion for my campaign, I'll do whatever you want. At the same time, he says the climate crisis is a hoax. We've got to lead the world, and this is about jobs and economic opportunity as well.
Okay.
Kent,
We've got to lead in this area.
We need to be energy independent.
What does that mean?
The Biden-Harris administration pulled back on our opportunity and our ability to be energy independent, and in turn emboldened Iran. They are funding and are emboldening and allowing that trio of terror Iran, China, and Russia to destabilize our entire world. So let's start, when we talk about what our energy policy should be, we have to start protecting and stabilizing America and America's energy opportunity, and then we have to take it to the likes of Iran, where when you allow them to fill their pockets and then fund Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and you allow Russia to go into Ukraine, and you allow China to be sitting on the sidelines of Taiwan, it all can dial back into our energy policy that changed under the Biden-Harris administration.
We agree that we need energy independence, Kent. I think the difference is I want clean energy independence.
Okay.
If we want to end the volatility of the prices
You can't do that
at
on
the
the
pump,
shoulders of America's middle class.
if we want to end the volatility of the prices at the pump, we've got to wean ourselves off of foreign fossil fuels. Oil is a global commodity. And he obviously thinks it's a good one because of his Exxon investment. It's very clear.
Let me ask this. Power generation at Diablo Canyon has been extended for, I don't know, 20 years, I think. There's going to be a restart of 3 Mile Island in order for Microsoft to support its AI adventures. There is a new project underway in Wyoming to build the next gen nuclear plant. At the same time, China has now proposed 21 new nuclear plants to add to its fleet of 56. Is it time for us to bring more nuclear power to California?
I believe so. I mean, I don't think you can look at our energy issues without looking at an all-of-the-above solution, and that certainly includes nuclear power. I mean, we are not looking at today's nuclear power in the same way that people think of Chernobyl. And today's nuclear power opportunities are efficient, and they're safe, and we have to embrace them.
Okay.
Well, listen, right in the heart of our district, we have 1,600 tons of highly radioactive spent nuclear fuel from a decommissioning San Onofre nuclear generating station.
Metric tons.
I've been working very hard across the aisle. I created a bipartisan caucus, the Spent Nuclear Fuel Solutions Caucus, to actually address some of these challenges. We've been able to get $140 million for the Department of Energy to restart a consent-based siting process so we find somewhere to send all of this waste from the United States. You can't keep it where it's at. We've got earthquake faults, sea level rise, and 9 million people within 50 miles. I have another bill with Darrell Issa, bipartisan bill, to prioritize moving nuclear waste from these high-risk sites once we figure out where all this waste is going to go in either a storage or repository facility. Now, that is all to say that there's great innovation within the nuclear space, but we've got to fix the back end of the fuel cycle before we build more nuclear power plants in California. It may work in other parts of the United States, North Carolina, maybe other parts. About 45% of the zero-emission energy in the United States today is coming from nuclear energy. But I don't want to see more legacy fission plants built in California until and unless we have fixed the back end of the fuel cycle. I also want to make sure that we do everything we can around nuclear innovation. I'm a member of the Fusion Caucus. I think there's great potential for nuclear fusion. I think there's also potential for small modular reactors, such as Bill Gates is doing with TerraPower. I'm always for innovation, but I think with wind, solar, storage, geothermal, hydro, there's so many things that we can do to keep the lights on as we continue to innovate and as we continue to lead. And that's what I want. I want for us in California, and specifically for this district, to lead when it comes to the clean energy revolution. I always believe in the adage, you should skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where the puck is today.
Okay, where should those 16,000 metric tons of spent fuel go?
Well, the nuclear waste issue is not a partisan issue. Obviously, whoever's representing the 49th district has to make that a priority. And the current position right now is it's going to solve its problem in 2045. And we can spend as much money on government, studies, et cetera, as you want to spend. And there isn't going to be a solution in the short term because nobody else wants your dirty laundry at their house either. So we've got to address that issue from a federal government standpoint. And his most recent political gimmick is we're going to start a whole new federal agency that's going to, deal with net waste. How about getting the Department of Energy to do its job? And he has had 6 years to do his job, and it's collecting money and talking about it, but there's no solution at hand. So let's be honest with the people and say, hey, this is a highly complicated issue that's going to take a massive federal directive, and it's not going to be because one congressman started one more study.
Kent, if I could,
of where it should go.
I've been working this issue for a decade. I've never seen you in one meeting. I've never seen you on one Zoom or one call. Never any scintilla of interest in this issue until your answer just now. As far as our new legislation, bipartisan legislation with August Pfluger of Texas to create a new nuclear waste administration, this is not a new idea. This is something that Senator Feinstein and others had worked on for many years. It's still a good idea.
So why not make our existing government more efficient and more productive?
Because the Department of Energy...
More bloated government is not the answer.
May I please? Because the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission have too many political appointees that shift their views, administration to administration.
The existing government.
If you want to see a ringing endorsement of this bill, ask your friend Jim Desmond. He wrote a very nice endorsement of this legislation because he's actually been there working with me to an extent. And Jim and I have a good working relationship, and he's been there at the table. You have not. So you're more than welcome to join the table after the election in your capacity as a private citizen.
Let me change the topic slightly. One of the roles that congressmen have is to kind of bring home the bacon in terms of bringing home dollars for projects in the district. If you were elected, what would you like to see federal dollars coming into the district to do? What kind of projects are you interested in?
Well, I think obviously, if there's money to be brought in that can solve the nuclear waste problem, absolutely. But let's just not say that bringing money in is going to solve that problem. I think the Tijuana sewage plant is a massive problem. And yes, there have been $300 million allocated to that out of his so-called $900 million he's brought home to the district.
Not part of it.
And nothing has happened. It is still a problem. This isn't about throwing more money at a problem. This is about finding the resources and finding a new solution for an old problem, because we got a lot of old problems and we don't have any solutions.
Okay.
If I may, we have 10 cities in the district. We've got Republican mayors, we've got Democratic mayors, different city councils. Everyone has their own priorities. I don't try to tell our cities what those priorities should be. What works here in Oceanside doesn't necessarily work in Carlsbad or Vista or Laguna Niguel. And I meet those mayors and those councils where they are. And what I've tried to do as a result of that is fund those top priorities. Here in Oceanside, it's been things like the Landis Community Center. It's been the new Fire Station 1 in Oceanside, in downtown Oceanside. It's been the Homeless Navigation Center, $2.25 million for that 50-bed facility that I hope will be expanded to 100 beds. They're not my ideas. They're my ability to try to do all I can to deliver those federal resources to the top priorities of each community. It just so happens that a lot of that money is for physical infrastructure, but not necessarily all of it. And that's been my guiding principle all along. And the $931 million does not include the $300 million we secured in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. I share your frustration, believe me, about the Tijuana River Valley and those pollution issues. And I would just encourage everybody, we've got the receipts. So if you go to our website, mikelevin.org, we have a map with every city in the district where you can choose your city and you can see exactly what those projects are, where the money went. We're very proud of it. And we're just getting started on this.
Okay. Different topic. There have been nearly 300,000 undocumented immigrant encounters at the San Diego border in the past year. The strain on California resources is enormous. What should be done to help our communities deal with this problem?
So I was just there Monday before last, and I've been going consistently to the border, meeting with the head of Border Patrol and the agents there who are doing an excellent job. And I can tell you that the policies that I have supported, he'll say whatever he wants to say, but the policies I've supported is always to provide them more funding, more personnel, more technology, so that we can do all we can to reduce or eliminate altogether the people who are coming in between ports of entry. What I can tell you is when I was at the Jacumba area back in May of this year, there were roughly 1,400 encounters a day, far too high. And look, I absolutely believe that the administration should, as they repealed Title 42, rescinded Title 42, they were unprepared. I don't think the appropriate response was what your party did to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. The appropriate response would have been to work with us on a bipartisan border security deal that included more funding for 22,000 Border Patrol and the technology that they need. And instead, Donald Trump and Mike Johnson killed that bill because they didn't want it in a year where they were up for election. Now, let me just finish the answer, Ken. I went back after the president's executive action, which I strongly supported, to have order at the border, to have a more orderly asylum process and credible fear process. That was in early June. I went back at the 1-month mark. Border crossings in between the ports of entry were down by 19%. I went back at the 3-month mark. That's a couple of weeks ago. Now, street releases have gone to 0 in San Diego, 0 over the past now around 10 weeks. The number of apprehensions has dropped from that 1,400 down to between 400 and 600 a day. What that has meant is that our Border Patrol, who are doing that hard work, can actually focus on drug trafficking, on human trafficking, and on going after potential terrorism. And they just seized 105 pounds of fentanyl at the San Clemente checkpoint. They're getting their job done. What we need on a go forward, because he'll say I'm not advocating. Wait a minute. Let me just finish, Ken. We need a bipartisan border security deal.
Okay, hang on.
We need people to stop pointing fingers, casting aspersions.
Okay.
So you go ahead now. You point fingers and you cast aspersions.
This is the great manipulation of numbers coming from the incumbent here. The truth is that there were 17 border security bills across his desk. 13 of them had bipartisan Democratic support, and he voted against all 17 of them.
I voted to increase border.
When he wants to talk about,
Stop, Mike.
When he wants to talk about the bipartisan bill that Donald Trump supposedly stopped, that bill had never left the Senate. They couldn't even pass it out of the Senate.
They wouldn't allow it to leave.
And
it was going to pass the Senate. It was written by one of the most conservative senators.
The House provided H.R. 2 to the Senate, and his party's leader would not even bring it up for consideration. The reality is we have an open, porous border that he sat and tolerated for 3.5 years, and only now, when he's in a tough re-election fight, he all of a sudden decides it might be an issue. The reality is that's like the arsonist calling the fire department.
Just because you haven't been paying attention to what I've tried to do these last 3.5 years doesn't mean I haven't done it.
With 300,000.
First and foremost, we just absolutely have to secure the border and stop this illegal immigration. We've got to reinstate Remain in Mexico. We have to tighten the asylum challenges, and we have to just catch and release. We can't catch and release. We have to have catch and return.
We have to codify it.
Let me ask this. What should happen to Dreamers?
Well, I think we absolutely have to have a conversation about a DACA bill and do something. As I said, he can sit here and spout off numbers all day long with acronyms and statistics from his 6 years in Congress, but we know that politics as usual isn't getting anything done. In the past, it's broken. So yes, I will sit down and have a serious conversation about one of the DACA bills and how we move towards some kind of serious immigration reform. But you cannot talk about serious immigration reform when you've got an open border. You cannot talk about remodeling your kitchen when your house is on fire, and right now our border is on fire, and that's our house.
So
and
Matt is right that there are politicians in both parties who do nothing but point fingers, cast aspersions, and try to win elections by using immigration and border security as a campaign issue, and I've had enough of it. And there are plenty of us, myself included, who've been trying to promote solutions like the Dignity Act, which is a good bipartisan bill, and like the bipartisan border security deal, which was negotiated by James Lankford of Oklahoma, one of the most conservative senators, and had around 70 votes in the Senate until Donald Trump told Mitch McConnell to kill it. That's how it went down. Trust me.
Let me go back and let me ask the question. What should happen for Dreamers?
Well, we have to pass the DREAM Act. I absolutely believe that if you come to this country and you're contributing positively to our economy, to our society, and it's very personal for me, so you would never know this unless you looked me up on Google or you heard me say it some other time, but I am the grandson on my mom's side of 2 immigrants from Mexico who came here at a very young age. They worked incredibly hard. They played by the rules. They learned the English language. They started a small business. They had 4 daughters, including my mom. My grandparents never even graduated from high school. All 4 of the girls graduated from college, including my mom. And now their youngest grandson is a member of the House of Representatives. I would like to think that a story like that could still happen, but it will not so long as Donald Trump and his party want mass deportations of millions and millions of people who are playing by the rules, who are paying taxes, who are working hard. They represent the best of what we aspire to be as Americans, and they want to deport them.
In your ideal of an immigration reform bill, would there be merit-based entry? Would you do away with chain entry? And is there anybody who, if anybody, should be deported?
Well, we have to deport violent criminals. We have to deport anybody that is committing sexual offenses, drug offenses. I voted actually with his party on a lot of these things, regardless of what he wants to say. He can look at the voting record and he can see for himself.
All of a sudden, he did.
And all of a sudden, 6 years all of a sudden. So listen, here's the deal. Here's the deal. We're either going to come together and we're going to have that Venn diagram and figure out where we agree and focus on that, or we're going to spend the next 2 years in more silly season and nothing will get done. And I've heard nothing from you. And you seem to be a very nice person. You seem to care about our community. You seem to have a very nice family. But I've heard nothing from you that actually would give me reason to believe that if you were actually there with me in Congress, you would be part of the solution. I think you would do what Donald Trump and Mike Johnson told you to do.
You can accuse me of that, and then I just accuse you back of being a puppet of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and watching the
First,
last
it's
3.5
Kamala,
years.
not Kamala, as your
Matt,
friend Donald Trump likes to say.
In your ideal immigration bill.
Can I say one thing? To say I'm a puppet of Joe
No,
Biden
okay,
after I didn't
now
even
let's-
support him as the nominee of our party
And you
is
just accused
outrageous.
me of being a puppet of Donald Trump. So
You
this
ran
is
on
your
being
personal
on
attacks.
being a puppet of Donald Trump.
Let me ask
Ken.
questions, guys. Let's bring it back. I still would like the answer. If you had your ideal immigration reform bill, what about the Dreamers? What about merit-based entry? What about chain entry?
Okay, I think, when we talk about immigration reform, we have to talk about the absorption issue, because in 62 years of Ellis Island, we brought in 12.1 immigrants. We processed 12.1 million immigrants through Ellis Island over 62 years. Every single one of them was fully vetted, fully tested, with an assimilation plan and a support plan, and distributed across the United States. That's the kind of approach we have to take, where we do address the issue of merit. We do address the issue of not disconnecting families and disrupting, productive people into this country. I don't know the exact concept of an immigration policy, but we need to get there. We need to have a serious conversation. As Mike said, let's talk about what's doable and what we can come to agreement on. And I said, but first and foremost, we've got to secure our existing border and then get into that conversation.
Thing, Ken. It sounds like you have concepts of a plan, which we heard from President Trump. I want to know whether you agree with the rhetoric, the extremist rhetoric that Trump and Vance have promoted.
He's the moderator,
with
not
Ohio
you,
saying that Haitian immigrants are eating dogs and cats. Do you agree? That's your party. Do you agree with that rhetoric? It's a simple yes or no.
Mike,
He won't answer, so I assume it's yes.
I'd be happy to answer you, but he's the
Why don't you answer
moderator.
then? I want to know, because it's deeply offensive.
I have no idea what's going on in Springfield.
So you don't know if it's happening
Ohio.
or not. You think it's okay though? The rhetoric.
Guys,
you think it's all right?
Let me move us on.
I guess he thinks
we
it's
have
okay.
alumni from Cal State San Marcos. We have alumni from Maricosta. We have alumni from Palomar. I'm sorry, I don't know the Orange County colleges and university well.
Can't forget about Saddleback, Ken.
Okay. Should additional student debt be excused at taxpayer expense? Should colleges and universities bear some responsibility for the load?
This is an area where I don't wholly agree with what my party and President Biden did. I would have focused instead on the interest. So Congress can help inform the interest rate on federally guaranteed student loans, and I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that would have eliminated that interest. What you have a lot of people get in trouble with is that if they don't make their payments, so they take out loans. I think it's important when you take out a loan that you try to make good on that principal. But the problem has been the variable interest rates, and particularly that's true for parent plus loans or other relatives that are having to sign for their son, daughter, niece, nephew. So I would start with the interest. I also would dramatically expand the public service loan forgiveness program, and I would double the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant, when it was created, was supposed to actually cover the cost of a college education, and it no longer does that. And I would hope we could find some common ground on doing all those things.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, I do not agree with the Biden-Harris administration on loan forgiveness. I do think that we have this constant snowball effect of the universities increasing tuition, and they're the benefits of this high tuition and putting college and universities out of reach for the average American. Now, and it baffles me actually that the administration can continue to defy the courts and say, hey, I'm going to do it anyway, even though we've ruled that they can't, or the courts have ruled that they can't. Now, with that said, if there's a way to highly target student loan forgiveness, so if you are going to go teach school in the rural areas of Kentucky or the inner city in LA, or you're going to be a doctor in underserved areas, absolutely, let's target it in that way, and let's make it a productive, loan forgiveness program that's incentivized for some kind of payback. But I mean, the idea that we're just going to put forgiveness on the table for college loans that are, art history majors, and not address technical colleges, not address technical people who went out and bought a truck and became a plumber. I mean, it's just, it's counterintuitive
I agree with
to what
everything you
America's
said
about.
until he went after the art history majors. That's too far. No, I'm kidding. There are 9,000 creative professionals in our district. My mom is an artist, but let me say this. I actually want to strengthen public education. And far too often what I see today is you have folks who are going after the public schools, denigrating them, using them to try to score political points, going after our teachers, going after school administrators. And instead what they want is for that money to go to private schools or to go to vouchers for parents.
So you're against vouchers?
I'm for my kids going to our local public school, and I'm very proud of that. I don't know if your kids went to public school.
Pardon?
Would you support vouchers?
Yeah, I believe in school choice. I mean, I think we need to give parents more control over the education of their children. And the issue of school choice is highly popular in underserved areas like the inner city, because these kids are caught in the morass of bad public schools. My kids went to a combination of public and private schools. I see where he's going. He's trying to attack me because I sent my kids to a private school in San Juan Capistrano. My kids went through the first 6 years of their education at the public schools in Ladera Ranch, and we have an incredibly positive experience there.
Those are great. The Capital Unified Schools are great schools where he sent his kids for the first 6 years, where I sent mine, or continue to send mine. We've got to invest in those schools, not cut and run, not take that money and put it into a voucher program, not take that money and give it back as some form of voucher. I don't agree with that.
I just want to make one comment to show you how dishonest, I'd say, the congressman is being, is the fact that his children attended the same private school
For
that
preschool,
my
for
children
1 year,
attended
for 1 year.
until he decided to run for
preschool,
Congress.
wrong.
And then he thought that would look poorly
For
and reflect
preschool, for
poorly
1
on
year.
him. So he pulled his kids from that school
preschool,
and
for
put
1
them
year.
in public
So
schools.
let's just
be candid and
let's
honest.
do it.
Okay.
You want to
We-
attack me, I'm going to attack you back.
We go to church at St. Margaret's Episcopal Church. It's a fine place to go to church. My wife and I was raised Catholic on one side, Jewish on the other. My wife was raised Presbyterian. We go to an Episcopal church, go figure. But we don't send our kids to school there because it's almost $50,000 a year per kid. That's a lot of dough. I don't know how much money you made as a car dealer. I don't make that much money as a member of Congress. In fact, members of Congress haven't gotten a raise since 2008, which is quite remarkable. You're about to...
Nobody goes into politics to become wealthy.
I agree with that. If they do, they're either stupid or corrupt, which is why we have to ban stock trading.
Let me,
agree on that.
I want to move us on. We've got a few minutes left to some foreign policy questions. In response to the October 7th attack, Israel has responded in pretty much flattening Gaza. It's lately, in the last week or 10 days, decimated Hezbollah. It's responded over the weekend to the Houthis. What should the U.S. policy be in that part of the Middle East?
Well,
Who wants to go?
I would start by saying that back in February, I was at the Kfar Aza kibbutz that was attacked by Hamas on October 7th. So I was there roughly 8 months before, meeting with those children who eventually would be killed, meeting with their mothers who were, in some cases, brutally raped and murdered. And Israel, as a sovereign democracy, as a strong ally, crucial ally of the United States, has every right, and I would say the responsibility, to defend itself against terrorism, whether it be from Hamas, or whether it be from Hezbollah or from the IRGC. So I am deeply concerned. I've been on the border as well with Israel and Lebanon, seeing people just on the other side of the border who are literally pointing weapons towards those of us who are assembled at that kibbutz in the north. But I don't want to see things spiral out of control. I'm very concerned about that. And I am no great fan of Bibi Netanyahu. I've been very clear. All the way since December of last year, I have felt that Netanyahu's not the right person to lead Israel towards a more peaceful future. I still believe in the dignity of the Palestinian people as well. I believe in all human dignity, and I do think that we've got to try for, with whatever effort we can, to get a diplomatic solution. And
Does that mean a two-state solution?
I want to see a two-state solution, but I'll tell you what all this results from my.
We're running out of time, so
if you want to talk about this or about Ukraine, I can do all of it at once and tell you, when you meet as many young junior enlisted Marines and sailors as I have and as I do, you get to know them, their stories, their families, their wives, their children. The last thing you ever want to do is to send them personally into harm's way.
Right.
And whether it's the Ukraine-Russia conflict or the Israel-Hamas-Hezbollah conflict, we need to keep this from spiraling out of control, because we do never want to send our American men and women into harm's way.
Okay. Matt.
His party's administration has got us closer to World War III than we have seen in years. And wherever the wind blows, there Mike Levin will be. Today he's on the side of Israel. Yeah, he voted against the first two Israel aid packages after October 7th.
Well, the first one was tied to IRS funding.
And he refused to vote to censor Rashida Tlaib, his colleague, who is anti-Semitic times 10.
Just like,
so let's just have a
do you
conversation
condemn Marjorie
about,
Taylor Greene's
I believe
anti-Semitism?
we need to stand with Israel. We
How
need
about
to
Elon
support
Musk's
Netanyahu,
anti-Semitism?
and we need to support Israel in every way possible.
Do you condemn Marjorie Taylor
I would
Greene's
share
anti-Semitism?
my argument with him.
Let's
or his
let's
position
try and
on
talk.
keeping boots off the ground. But this administration, which he's a party of, has been wrong on foreign policy on every single issue since the retreat from Afghanistan.
I believe in the separation of powers. I'm a proud member of the legislative branch, not the executive branch.
Let me ask it this way. We have authorized $175 billion to support Ukraine. Should there be more money after that?
Well, this is where, again, the administration made mistakes where they should have invested much more, much earlier, and put it into this war. The reality is we cannot let China, Iran, and Russia win and continue to punch back against the weakness that we have shown on the international front. We've got to step up and get back to the concept of peace through strength and continue to be the leader of the free world.
So I agree largely with what he said, but I asked a fairly simple question, which is, will you condemn the anti-Semitism on your side of the aisle, from Marjorie Taylor Greene and Elon Musk? Because I have and will condemn it on my side.
I will condemn anti-Semitism all day long. I have no idea what Marjorie Taylor Greene or Elon Musk have said in that regard.
You should Google it, and before you go espouse Elon Musk.
I don't speak for Elon Musk. I don't speak for Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You think you should be put in charge like a modern-day oligarch, as the efficiencies are?
No, I said I want him to take on the idea of government efficiency.
He likes laying people
off. You like
off.
bloated government. I like streamlined, efficient government.
I like working across the aisle, getting results done, common sense. That's what I hope to do. Now, let me say one other thing. I think it's very important that in Ukraine, we prevent this from becoming a NATO-involved war. As soon as Putin takes Kyiv, and Trump has no strategy on this other than to do whatever Putin wants. He will sell Zelensky down the river. He called Zelensky, who is fighting for the freedom of his sovereign nation that was attacked 2 years ago by Putin. Trump calls him a salesman, the greatest salesman. He has no respect for Zelensky. We impeached Donald Trump the first time over his trying to extort Zelensky to get dirt on his on Trump's political opponents. It's outrageous to think that Donald Trump and his chaos and dysfunction and narcissism will lead to a safer, freer world. That is outrageous. This man has authoritarian tendencies.
Should Zelensky be given a green light to use longer-range ballistic missiles to throw into Russia?
I think that Zelensky should be given the latitude to defeat Putin with the careful oversight of America in terms of how the dollars are being spent, and to prevent the war from spiraling into a NATO ally eventually. Listen, if Trump is in there and he sells Zelensky down the river, which he will, that's his secret plan, is to do whatever Putin wants, and Putin were to then go into a Baltic state, a NATO ally, then we will see the involvement of America and our men and women being put unnecessarily in harm's way.
Putin has said that Ukraine's use of longer-range ballistic missiles, at least in any sizable number, is a red line for him that would result in response back to NATO. Is that a good idea or not?
I think we have to be extremely careful that, again, Ukraine was attacked.
Okay.
They are fighting a defensive war.
Understand.
We need them
We heard
to
that.
succeed in that defensive war.
Matt.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Levin's a pretty good surrogate for the Kamala Harris presidential campaign because he seems to want to have this conversation about Trump and attack
I'd rather
Trump.
be a surrogate
and
for
the reality
Kamala, and
is,
you can be a surrogate for
I'm not
Trump.
running for president.
Sounds
I'm
great.
running for Congress.
As a
and
Trump
this is one
Republican.
area where we disagree. I disagree with Trump. I think that we have to embolden Zelensky and the Ukraine to end this war, and we cannot let Russia win.
Remember,
Okay.
Trump wouldn't even commit that Ukraine should win.
Okay, certainly nuclear war is an existential threat. Are there any other existential threats in your mind to this country and our society?
Well, I think one of the most existential threats right now is the infiltration of the CCP into our country, into our educational environments, into our technological environments. They're here. We don't know where they're going. We don't know what they're doing, and we have to put a stop to China. And again, Congress has to be more aggressive. I mean, I was really, really disappointed to see Mike Gallagher resign from the U.S. House as leader of the Select Committee on China because they were making some progress in identifying opportunities for us to put a stop to that infiltration into our country. And
We agree on this.
it has to continue.
Mike Gallagher is a good man, and he worked in a straightforward, bipartisan manner with my friend Raja Krishnamurthy on that select committee, and I hope that work continues in the next Congress. I firmly agree on the Chinese Communist Party. I also believe that climate change creates a existential threat if it's not addressed with seriousness, commensurate with what science demands we do.
In what time frame do you see that as an existential threat?
Well, I'm not the expert, but I will turn to the experts that we have in this district. Scripps Institution of Oceanography, UC San Diego, UCI, and others will suggest that if we don't take dramatic actions to roughly halve our greenhouse gas output from human-caused sources over the next decade, that we're going to do irreversible harm. The Keeling curve was invented right here at UC San Diego, and we're up around 420 parts per million of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere, the highest it's ever been. I mean, I take what they say at face value. I trust when they tell me at our research institutions, at our universities, that we've got to take action from a scientific perspective. And I'm committed to doing that. But I will tell you, the other thing that I think is very dangerous and is unacceptable would be nuclear material or a nuclear weapon in the hands of a terrorist. And I'm very concerned about that as well.
With regard to climate change?
Yeah, with that said, I mean, I'm not a climate change denier, but unless we make sure that China and India and these other countries address their impact on CO2 emissions, America can put all of these onerous costs and movements on the shoulders of Americans' middle-class people, and it's not going to make a beans of difference. I always say it's like me giving up cookies to address the issue of obesity. I'm not the problem. So you can look at this on a parochial level in America, and climate change is impactful. We are addressing it. We're being aggressive, but we cannot be so aggressive that it completely destroys our economy and it destroys our ability for Americans to live
Kent,
here.
if I may, these are the talking points.
These
are the talking points of the American Petroleum Institute and the fossil fuel industry to say, well, China and India need to solve their emissions first. No, we need to lead. And if we lead, not only will we lead on reducing emissions, we will lead on economic growth. This is the greatest economic opportunity of the 21st century for us to lead on clean energy technology, just as we led in every other industrial revolution in our 240-plus year history. Because in 30 or 40 years, we're going to be using these technologies. Will they be Chinese or Indian, or will they be assembled, manufactured, and invented here in the United States? That's what I want to see.
Should the third world country be given a pass on its fossil fuel use in order to boost its economy and to boost its standards of living?
I think everybody has a role to play in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And I've been now to a couple of the UN climate conferences around the world, and I think the U.S. has to lead by example. And our innovation needs to be embraced in this country.
And apparently he
ingenuity.
wants to do it through the pocketbooks of every middle-class family in
Absolutely
America.
wrong. It will be a
And that's
cost
not
savings. It will be a
acceptable.
cost savings. If we transition away from the volatility of fossil fuels and embrace clean
right.
energy and energy efficiency, it will
We
save the
have-
average American hundreds of dollars a year or thousands.
We have just a couple of minutes left before we have to move to closing statements. Is there an issue or topic that is burning that somebody wants to raise
Sure.
and talk about?
How about
Not closing statement.
How
just
about the
a
issue
topic.
of reproductive rights? So
Okay.
I think it's very
Should
clear.
there, let me ask it this
Yeah.
way. Should there be a national or federal abortion law?
There should be the Women's Health Protection Act to codify Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade was the law of the land for 50 years. Amy Coney Barrett, who he enthusiastically supported to be a
Okay.
Supreme Court justice, along with Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and that 6-3 majority, they passed the Dobbs decision, and that ended Roe versus Wade. And now
And pushed it-
44% of this country, 44% of the women in this country have no access to abortion. I didn't hear him complain when the Dobbs decision was
Okay.
passed. I didn't hear him complain when
Let-
his party blocked the IVF bill or blocked the
Let-
right to contraception. All I hear is him trying
me-
to be very sneaky and have it both
Let-
ways.
let me-
Planned
let me-
Parenthood knows
Let me-
there's only
let-
one of us
Mike,
that will stand up for
there's-
women's
we're gonna-
rights and reproductive
Let me
rights.
ask the same question to Matt. Would you be in favor of a federal or national abortion law?
First of all, you can document my position on choice dating back to 1994. But with that said, I'm a states' rights guy. I believe that the Supreme Court has passed that down to the state of California, and the decision's been made in California. I do
He said
not
it
believe
was
I will not.
unfortunate
Could
that
you
that
let me
happened.
speak?
Please, I've heard you
I will
speak.
not vote to codify Roe v. Wade, but I also will not vote for a federal ban on abortion.
He said he was unclear.
okay.
He had to see the details. He was asked
Let's-
at a Republican
let-
Party event whether he would support a national
Let-
abortion ban, and he said, I'd have to see the details.
Okay.
He's not leveling with the people watching this.
and you are
let me-
full of it.
We have the
let
tape,
me
Matt.
stop-
We have you on tape.
Let me stop both of you right
I've made
now.
it very clear I would
and
not vote for a
He
federal
Let
called
me
abortion
Prop
stop.
ban,
1
But
but I also
disgusting
will
to
not
protect
codify Roe
reproductive
v.
rights.
Wade.
He called it
Wait a
disgusting.
minute. Quit talking over
I
me.
said
Let's
that
move on to
late-term
closing.
abortion was disgusting.
Let's move
That bill,
on
that
to
proposition
closing
does not do
statements.
that, and you know it.
That Prop 1 takes all fetal viability language
Let-
out of
It makes no
California
changes
abortion
to the
law.
viability standard.
Without further discussion on the topic, let us move to closing statements.
I guess we're not going to agree on that one.
I guess not.
Okay.
I think, Matt, you're up first.
Yeah, well, I do thank you for having this, having us here today. And in 1958, the Pew Research Institute started surveying Americans and their trust in our federal government. In 1958, over 75% of Americans trusted their federal government to do the right thing. This past spring, it had gone down to 22%. That is clear that we have to change what's going on in Washington, D.C. We have to change the idea that Washington, D.C. knows what's right, and we have to change America's view of Washington, D.C. And that's why I'm running for Congress. As you know, I have 4 daughters, ages 18 to 23. And I'm a girl dad in every way. I'm a pro-choice Republican that believes abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And it's those 4 girls and every young American in the 49th District and across this country that are motivating me to run. Because we currently do not have a government that is concerned about securing our border and addressing the immigration process. We do not have a government that is willing to address rampant spending that is driving inflation and killing our family budgets. We do not have a government that's living within its means. And we do not have a government that's respecting local control and the fact that states and local governments often know what's better for their communities than some dictate from the federal government. I say on the campaign trail all the time, you're not going to agree with me 100% of the time, but you're never going to have to wonder where I stand on an issue or how I got there. And it's that kind of transparency and candor that we want in our public officials. And that's not the kind of transparency and candor we get from our incumbent congressman. He comes home spouting bipartisanship and spouting consensus building, and the reality is he's a 98.7% voter with the Progressive Caucus and 100% voter with the Democratic administration. This is a purple district. This is a third, a third, a third. And you cannot come home and look people in the face and tell them that you're really representing the interests and concerns of the constituency here in the 49th when you've got an extreme voting record like he has. We're not going to solve our problems from the extremes, either from the extreme right or the extreme left. And I'm always reminded of my favorite quote, Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Your purpose in life is not to be happy, it is to be useful." That's what drives me. I think you can find a whole lot of personal happiness by identifying your usefulness. So I'm asking you for your vote and to help me be useful to the 49th District, to the state of California, and the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Well,
Mike.
thank you, Kent, for hosting, and thank you, Matt. Thank you to everybody at KOCT, and thank you all for watching. You know, I am very proud of the record that I have of delivering results over these last 5.5 years as your representative, and it's why the Nonpartisan Center for Effective Lawmaking has consistently rated me as one of the top 5% of all 435 lawmakers in the House of Representatives. It's not because I'm pointing fingers and casting aspersions on every topic, not because I'm trying to score political points, but it's because I have rolled up my sleeves and actually worked across the aisle, passing 30 bipartisan bills into law, signed by both former President Trump and current President Biden. And all the bills that we've done for veterans, I'm very honored, has led to my receiving the 2024 VFW Legislator of the Year, which the Veterans of Foreign Wars give each year to a legislator for their work. I can tell you that I'm astonished to hear him accusing me of being some sort of wild-eyed liberal when my voting record is actually that I'm the 118th in terms of my ideology score, 118 in the House Democratic Caucus, which puts me smack in the middle of the House Democrats. And every one of those 30 bipartisan bills that I've worked on have been they've been Republicans and Democrats that have worked together to actually get it done. Just the same is true with the investments we've gotten for our community, $931 million and counting. I've worked with Republican mayors, I've worked with Democratic mayors to make investments in our community to improve the quality of life in our district, to get sand on the beach, to improve the quality of our public schools, our roads, our bridges, our water systems, to finally get that nuclear waste off the coast at San Onofre. We've been working very hard to do that. And I've tried to be straight every step of the way with the voters of this district. And I agree that you're not going to agree with me 100% of the time, but I'll always tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing and what my values are. My values are a commitment to our community. And when I think about my why, it's my wife and two beautiful kids at home, 12 and 10 years old. What kind of planet are they going to inherit? What kind of a democracy is going to be here for them? Am I going to do what I can to make this world and this country better than how I found it? And that's my pledge to you and my commitment to you every single day. I will tell you that Matt ran as a strong Trump Republican in the primary. He even sent out mail with him and Donald Trump side by side, two conservatives, two independent businessmen. And if you love Donald Trump, you're going to love Matt Gunderson. On the other hand, if you want somebody who's actually focused on results, focused on being a workhorse rather than a show horse, somebody who's focused on the number of bills rather than the number of TV appearances, then I'm honored to be your representative, and I hope to earn your continued trust and continued support.
I'd like to thank both of you, Matt, Mike, for your participation in this, Matt Gunderson and Congressman Mike Levin. And I wish each of you good luck in this race. Please make sure to vote. It's an important election. Again, viewers can watch this and other candidates for other Oceanside election races at koct.org. Thank you for watching this station and this program.
KOCT, its board of directors, staff, and the City of Oceanside do not support nor promote any candidates. We provide the following program as a public service for voters. All candidates have been invited to participate in this program, but not all were able to or chose to do so.
You're watching KOCT Television in Oceanside.